Good afternoon, folks. This is Chuck with 83 Metalcraft. On today's episode, we are going to be looking at building a security window. My buddy with Pelletary Creations here in Colorado Springs gave us a call recently, and they wanted to build a security window. Now, the traditional security window with an egress generally would open side to side, one way or the other. But in this case, we don't have much room. And so we're going to do something a little bit different. So what we're going to do, this was already previously discussed, is we're actually going to open right to left, but we're going to collapse the security window. And so it will be basically a three-part hinged security window with lockers on it. So first of all, what I want to show you guys is, okay, how do we come up with the measurements for the security window? So basically what we do is we always want to take an outside measurement. So in this case, we're going to basically measure from the top down on the trim. In this case, we're at 54 3/4 inches. And then we're going to go side to side laterally and get our measurement. In this case, we are 78 5/8. Now, it is important on this, when you're going to build this, you've got to have a place to mount. So something that's crucial that you're going to need to know when you go to build one of these, even for a conventional security window, is where are we going to mount? You always want to know how thick your material is that you're going to mount to. In this case, it's 3.5 inches. So basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to mount right in the center and build to the center. So in this case, I have taken my outside measurements, and from there I will deduct the thickness of my material that we are using for this job against the trim. That way we have a centered piece. The second thing I want to do is I want to measure up to this trim and where this gutter is. And so we got 33 1/4 inches. That's important because if we build the 3 panels that are going to be making up this collapse, we've got to stay within that parameter. And if we don't, we're going to obviously hit the gutter, which we don't want to do.
Alright, so what we're doing now, we got our measurements out in the field. We've come back to the shop and we are beginning to put the infill in. So, excuse me, we cut some parts, and so the framework is out of 1x2 rectangle. And now we're doing the infill material, which is 1/2 by 1.5 inch rectangle tubing. We've used, now in between, you'll notice, in between the panels, we've used flat bar, and that's because we're going to be attaching some hinges to all of this, and we don't want huge gaps in between the panels. So we've used flat bar instead, and they seem to be, you know, pretty stiff. Everything's good and straight, and so right here we're just beginning to go through and do all of our infilling. Now through all of this, it's important to try and get everything straight up and down. I'm using a spacer right here cut down to the calculated size that I needed for my spacing. And basically the way I figured out my spacing is I was able to mark down the frame and figure out how many runners I wanted to use, and I basically subtracted all of that to come out with an even layout up and down. Now with this, you know, with railing, you've got, you know, on straight rail, you've got a code requirement of nothing bigger than a 4-inch gap, and I didn't quite want there to be a 4-inch gap on these. This is not a railing, so we didn't have a rail code to deal with on this, so I made this about 1.25 inches bigger. I think I went with 5 5/16 or something like that. But we went slightly bigger to give a little more vision. We didn't want it to look so cluttered. But we went with, the same design as we did the rail with. We did railing for this client about a month earlier, and so we wanted to keep the same design. Excuse me. And so right here, I'm still infilling, but I'm getting ready to see a problem, and I kept this footage in a video on purpose. I know a lot of guys will act like they don't make mistakes, and somebody who's experienced never does anything wrong, and so on and so forth, and blah blah blah, but mistakes do happen. Yeah, and I'm starting to notice a mistake. And so I've stopped and I've tore a couple out, and I'm trying to find the mistake. And what I've noticed, as you see, I've got an open table. And so what I ended up doing is I was having a problem. I put one of my first pieces in a little bit crooked. I was using the spacer, yes, but it was still crooked. And then when that happens, as you continue to go down the line, as I would put it, it starts to cheat your measurement, maybe only a 16th apart, but by the time you get down, 5 or 6 pieces, that could be, 5/16 or a 3/8 different in spacing and visual lineup with all of your infill pieces, which doesn't look good. And so I spotted the error, and I'm repairing it. This is the stage to do it. You don't want to do it in a latter stage where you've got it completely welded up, because it becomes a nightmare to either cut apart or you have to completely rebuild it, whichever you end up doing. And so in my case, I fixed that. I was able to get it done, but the problem I end up realizing is that this part is kind of too wide for how high I am. And so I end up having the same problem here again in a few minutes and end up having to fix it again. But it's a good learning lesson for anybody who's just learning this process. One thing I've learned is be humble, be open-minded, and take accountability. To me, I've been welding 22 years, and even I make mistakes. But just make sure you fix it. Your client does not want a hunk of junk. And so now we're continuing spacing on the third panel and getting all of that in. And once again, I'm putting everything in, trying to straighten everything out with, crescent wrench. That's why I only tack on top initially. That way, if I need to adjust it to make sure it's square, I can. One thing I always do afterwards is I'll stand at the end of my piece, regardless of what my tape measure tells me. I will stand at the end of my piece and make sure everything looks like it's running in a straight line, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I can see there's a problem. Now I'm breaking out my tape measure, and I'm checking, because I can visibly see that I've got an issue on that third panel. But I need to find out where it originally came from, where it originated. And so I'm taking all precautions. I spot a couple issues here. First one being, when I tacked the frame together, I left a small bump of a weld, a small corner of a weld, and it's hitting my table, my jig side of the table of keeping things square. So, I want to eliminate that. That's not throwing it out the whole way, but it could be contributing to a little bit. So I take that into account, and I want to make sure that's clean and put together, and going through the whole process. And once again, I lock it up. I check the third panel. I see the same thing. So I clean off that tack, that little burr on the corner, and I do the same thing. At this point, I want to ensure that nothing is impeding keeping this panel square, because if you're working with an unsquare panel and trying to make everything square lines, you're not going to get it. It won't happen. So I'm still seeing an issue. That didn't straighten me out as much as I thought it would. Now I found the problem. The problem originates the fact that I'm 5'10". My table's a little bit too high for this panel to be built on it. I can't get over far enough, and I didn't have a step stool to use. And so when I was working towards the center, I was having a problem making sure everything was square. But the other problem I had is I had set my spacer bar too close to the weld, and I actually got it up on the corner of the weld that I had, and it threw out my measurement. And so if you don't notice that and you keep going, it will continue to throw out your measurement every single piece, and every piece that you go down the line, that problem continues to grow. And so I've noticed the growing problem. So the first step is go back to where the problem originated, fix that first, and then work down the line. And so that's what we're doing right now. I know that it was on that middle panel right in the center. So now we've got that lined up, and I've checked my lines. Everything's good on the first and second panel. Now I'm working on getting everything back right on the third panel. So we break the tacks loose that we had holding those in, take our grinder and our flap disc and make sure everything's cleaned up really nice. You don't want to leave any tacks. Number one, it could get in your way. Number two, if you happen to forget about it and it's left on the piece and you install this piece with a burr like that, you could leave that for the client and they could incidentally cut themselves, which, could injure them. It could get their hand infected. That could lead to lawsuits. That could lead to any number of problems. So ultimately, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you clean everything at the time you're doing it to ensure that no future issues arise from that mistake. So I think right here we about have this wrapped up this time. We got it squared and we got it right, and we're good to go. Alright, right here we're getting ready to start putting our hinges on now that we got some of this welded out, locked into place. And so that's what we're doing now, putting our first set of hinges on. Johnny was manning the GoPro for our B-roll footage in case we needed it. We ultimately didn't need it. So right here we're working on the second hinge for this first panel. We've about got that tacked together. So ultimately what we're doing now is we've got the first two hinges welded on and figured out, and so JJ's just kind of cleaning it up and getting all the welds ground down and nice and flush and clean. That way there's no spots to cut yourself, but also is much more aesthetically pleasing. And so now what we got to do that we have the first set of hinges on is we actually need to put on the second set of hinges for the other side. So one thing you want to do, make sure everything's fastened. And actually we did put that part on. I forgot about that. We did that off camera, but we needed to put that in. And so now we're just kind of finishing up the welding. Everything was locked in. Typical practice for us is to put everything in and weld one side of everything. And what I mean by that is basically, as everything is sitting flat, we want to put in as much as we can on the first side. So I like to try to do 75%. That way when we flip anything else over, we've only got 25% of the welding left to go. That, and the more you're able to get welded, on the first go around, just ensures that your part you're working on is going to be that much better and locked together. So right here we're just kind of finishing up the welds that we need to finish up that we couldn't reach from the other side. And I'm holding this part up for him, that way it doesn't fall on his head. Apparently I don't make a real good holder though, because I move quite a bit. But then again, this window frame, this security window, actually weighs quite a bit. So now he's cleaning up the rest of the welds that he just welded, getting them cleaned, because once we proceed from here, we won't really be able to reach them. But also we have to lay the security window back flat, and he won't be able to set the window back flat and square to the table if he doesn't get these welds ground down and cleaned up, because those will bind on the corner of the table, basically unsquaring everything we're working on. And so we're just trying to wrap that up right here before we move on to putting the mounting hinges on. Alright, now we're continuing to finish up the little last bit of cleaning this panel up, getting it ground down, make sure no welds are impeding, and then just kind of checking how everything rotates and closes in on itself. He's doing the grinding. I'm kind of looking around just to try to spot any potential issues, and not really seeing too many, so we're just rotating and he's kind of finishing up what he needs to get done, and so that's what we're doing here. We're about done with it. We'll be laying it down on the table here in a minute. We're going to be getting ready to start putting on the big hinges, the mounting hinges that we've got for this project. In the last clip, he missed a few small weld areas that I spotted, and so I was pointing them out and getting those going. As you can see, he's grinding that one. The reason he's grinding that one is because he's got to make sure that's flush, because that actually sets down in the table against the guide that keeps everything square. And if that doesn't get cleaned up, then it can throw everything out, which can become a royal nightmare. Alright, we've got it laid back down. It's almost time to put some big hinges on and get it clamped down and secured. And so now we've got our flat bar cut. For the massive hinge, we used a 2x3/8 flat bar, something nice and stiff. And so what we're doing here is putting some big barrel hinges on. These are 5-inch hinges. These have a massive rating. They will hold a lot. And we've got a lot of overhang on this window frame, so we really want something beefy. And so that's what we're doing right now. Getting those tacked together. Now off camera we did the first one, that way we had something semi-secure. That way we could show this and we both weren't totally in the way of the camera. So now we're just getting it tacked together, and now he's going to buzz some welds on it now that we know it's good, and rotates, and he's going to get it fully secure, that way it doesn't go anywhere. And then we can proceed from there. He ought to have this wrapped up momentarily. Now right here you can see we've put some 2x1/4 flat bar, and we're using those as basically stops to go against the window frame. These are on the third panel. We'll have something similar for the middle panel to do a stopper, that way it doesn't cave in the middle. So JJ's just wrapping this up and getting this welded really quick, and he'll be done shortly.
Alright folks, that's all for today. I hope you guys really liked the video. That's basically start to finish of how to build a collapsible security door. Everything else will be done out in the field. In the last clip you saw the stubs for the end. Basically we want to keep it off of the window frame. The other ones will be built off camera and will actually attach to the house for the center, because there's no way to put them on here without binding. So that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. We got more stuff coming real soon. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You guys have a great day. Alright folks, that's all for today. I hope you guys really liked the video. That's basically start to finish of how to build a collapsible security door. Everything else will be done out in the field. In the last clip you saw the stubs for the end. Basically we want to keep it off of the window frame. The other ones will be built off camera and will actually attach to the house for the center, because there's no way to put them on here without binding. So that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. We got more stuff coming real soon. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You guys have a great day.